I think it can be so easy to not realize how much influence that you have as just a person out in the workforce. Things that people that your pastor will never have a chance to be able to talk to, you have a chance to talk to every single day.
Let's have that conversation.
Welcome back to Authentic Conversations. On today's episode, we have two new guests that we're really excited about. And as they introduce themselves, they're also going to tell us their favorite post-Sunday service meal.
So my name is Casey Hicks, and I am hyphen pastor's wife. Woo! It's very easy for me to talk about food, and it's so funny because it's completely different from Austin's. But I would say just going home, making some fried chicken, and having like some cornbread, some fresh garden tomatoes, and like fresh cream corn. That's what I would say.
Corn.
You don't like corn?
I hate corn.
What?
Corn is like, no, the texture, just not for me.
My name is Chelsea Burton. I'm a part of the youth team here, and I do administration work in the office. And at the end of this year, I will be doing AIM work overseas.
And what's your favorite food?
Yes. My favorite after church meal, surprisingly, is probably Greenery Co. in Nashville. Normally, I'm not a big healthy eater, but I would say that's probably my favorite after church meal.
That's so surprising. Every time we go to a restaurant, when Chelsea orders a salad, she says, no cheese, no tomatoes, no cucumbers. She literally gets lettuce and ranch every time she gets a salad. So that's crazy.
It's honestly the best salad, though. Lettuce,
Greenery Co.
ranch,
salads
bacon.
are different, though.
Yeah, they like chop them all up.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I guess we can go and introduce ourselves. You guys have already seen us once before, but if you're new and this is your first episode, so I am David McNeily. I am the youth pastor here at Turning Point Nashville. And I think that my go-to food for like after a Sunday is kind of like basic, but it's always going to a Mexican restaurant. Mexican all the way, especially if you're able to get like chicken fajita nachos or like the chicken, cheese, and rice. It's just, so good.
I'm so surprised you didn't say cookout.
Cookout's good, but cookout is like a Wednesday night, like late at night, and then Sunday mornings is always Mexican.
You eat cookout every Wednesday.
Yeah, they have Cheerwine, and you can't get Cheerwine everywhere. So it's good. But
And then, as many of y'all know, I'm Austin Hicks, the hyphen pastor here at Turning Point Nashville. And my favorite meal in general and post-Sunday service is going and getting some good hibachi. Spicy rice. Also, just because it's Sunday, add a sushi roll.
But you can't taste the hibachi of how much yum you dump on the food.
That's what makes it hibachi, though.
That means it's just yum. He doesn't taste the actual hibachi.
But if you have good yum, it's,
Yeah, seriously, it's like when you get a salad, you put ranch or some kind of dressing on it because you want to taste the ranch with a salad. You're not wanting to have a salad with ranch. That's just how that works.
I normally give Austin my leftover ranch.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, we're coming to you today to be able to talk about a new episode on kind of what is it like to be a Christian in a career. So we decided that when me and Austin were talking that we wanted to bring in some other ones as well because just wanted to see what it was like going through different perspectives of the different jobs that we have. So I guess why don't we go and kind of go down the line, explain kind of what you do as a career, like where did that all start? Did you always know what you were wanting to do as you were going through school, or did you like switch your major up? Did it just kind of find you out of the middle of nowhere? Like, explain what all happened there. Casey, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So I feel like I've always said that I've always been lucky and just always knew what I wanted to do. I've always known that I wanted to be a nurse, but I never knew exactly where. And I always said, for some reason, like never Vanderbilt. And I guess just because it's so big, I was like, I want to start off small. And then the Lord said, nope. You're going to work at Vanderbilt. So I've been working as a nurse at Vanderbilt for probably almost 2 years, right?
Close, yeah.
Something like that. And what was the other question, David?
So did you always kind of know what you were wanting to do there, or did it just kind of pop up out in the middle of nowhere?
I always knew what I wanted to do. I wouldn't say I exactly knew that it was from the Lord, though, until I got started. Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't like I had a dream and I was a nurse, or someone prophesied over me and I was a nurse, or anything like that. I think I just always had a desire, like, to help people, I would say. So,
And what kind of nurse are you?
I work in the surgical ICU at Vanderbilt. So I kind of deal with people. If surgeries don't go well, they come to me. So every single day, you never kind of know what you're going to get. So it makes my job really interesting. I'm never bored. That's for sure.
Just I feel like interesting is like an understatement on that type of job in all reality.
It's so funny because when I talk about my day, and then Austin, he's a teacher. So when he talks about his day, it's like total opposite and we cannot relate at all.
Well, Austin, she kind of blew the coot on yours. Tell us, what do you do?
So you go from a surgical ICU nurse to a 7th grade math teacher. Big jump. But I started off in school. I thought, okay, I'll be a teacher. But then that changed so many times. I think I changed my major probably 6 times. And then still didn't even graduate with a teaching degree. I graduated with a psychology degree. But I'm getting my license as I teach and everything, but I teach 7th grade math, and that is definitely different than being a ICU nurse. But I think as I've gotten into it, I've realized that's something that I really enjoy, and kind of like Casey was saying, being able to help the young people, and even though it might be in a classroom setting, it's still being able to help.
Right. I mean, that kind of translates to what you do in ministry, too, because you're a hyphen pastor, and part of that is working with students. So it just kind of relates both to doing your career and doing church, too.
Yeah.
Mine has nothing to do with what I do in church. Again, I'm a youth pastor in the church, and I sing and I do podcasts. I do any of this, but as outside of the church, I still am going through school. I graduate in August, but I will be in architectural draftsman. So I work underneath an architect and I help to draw buildings and things like that. And for me, figuring out what I wanted to do or what I was supposed to do was something that was very, very difficult because I came out of high school taking engineering classes all through high school, but I wanted to do something with biology. I had read a story whenever I was in middle school of these people in New York that were having problems with coral reefs on the bays in New York. So what they did is they took old subway cars and then they created man-made coral reefs to be able to save that ecosystem. So like all through high school, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to design these things. Then I get into college and I take a college level biology class and I'm like, you know what? This is not for me. I remember that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and then that is about it. So then I moved on from there to construction engineering, and Austin P, where I went to college, actually dropped the program due to low amount of people taking that. So they transferred me over to mechatronic engineering, which is more robotic side of it. And I did that for about 3 years. And then God called me to Bible college for a semester. So I attended IBC for a semester there. And whenever I came back, I just found out that I was very unsatisfied with what I was doing with college as a whole. And I knew that I was called into ministry, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to be a mechatronics engineer at the scale of what I would hope to be, and also be able to do ministry at the scale I was hoped to be. So God kind of showed me a new route and then took me into tech school, where I'm now working to be the architectural draftsman. So I've been to like all 3 different types of schooling, but I'm settled and I'm ready to graduate and I'm ready to be done.
So I went to the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and I always knew that I wanted to coach basketball because I grew up playing basketball, but I was like, I'm not going to be a teacher because they definitely don't make money. So like Austin, I switched my major probably about 4 or 5 different times, trying to figure out what I wanted to do where I could make good money. But at the end of it, probably about my sophomore year, I was like, I'm going to be the happiest being a PE teacher or coaching. So I ended up switching my major to be a teacher. So I graduated and I'm able to be a PE teacher with K through 12. But right now I'm at a middle school teaching 5th through 8th grade. But when I first applied, the PE position wasn't open, but they did have another related arts class, and it's a career class. So it's called Career Exploration. And I talked to middle schoolers about jobs that they can get once they get out of high school. So.
Oh, that's cool. Say, I had a guidance counselor that kind of did that, and they're like, are you interested in this? I'm like, no. They're like, are you interested in this? No, not really. Well, what about this? No, that doesn't stick. So that didn't help me too much, but I know that helps students quite a bit to be able to figure out what they need. Well, I actually kind of have a question for everybody. So we talked about how we kind of found our careers and what we wanted that do. But let me ask you, do you believe that the careers that you're in now are like what God has fully called you to do? Or are they something that this is just a means to be able to get to where God has called me? Like, what's your perspective on that with your careers?
I can start. I think that with my ministry being like hyphen pastor, like teaching and kind of leading, I think teaching in a classroom, they go hand in hand. It's just you're teaching different things. And so I think teaching in a class every single day has helped me to feel more comfortable in front of people. And because I'm not always been good at getting in front of people and talking, that's not my cup of tea. But I think it has helped me and made me more comfortable in my ministry. And it's also allowed me to, minister and be the light of Christ in a school in a dark place. And that's, especially with middle school and high school, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of change, and they have no idea what's going on. They don't know what they're going to do. They don't know what's going on. Like, there's so many different things. And to be that person that they can, oh, Mr. Hicks, like, let me tell you about this, and just somebody that they can rely on as a teacher and as, an adult. I think my ministry and also my career outside of the church they go hand in hand. That's what I would say for being a teacher.
For my job, I feel like, not that it's a little easier, but I'm a nurse, so I feel like I'm put in situations where I'm the only church that most people see. And it's some of the most vulnerable that I see people. And I've been put in situations where, like, I get to talk to people about God, and when they didn't even know God before. And I know that me talking to them is them seeing something different. Right. And I've walked in a room before and I had a patient tell me that he just like saw something different. And so I feel like for me that my job is like the main part of my ministry. And as far as it connects to church, I get to practice praying with people. So reaching out in a dark time and praying with patients whenever no one else does, and then coming to church and then praying for others as well. And then to talk about it in 1 Corinthians, Paul is like, I have the gift of prophecy and I do all these things, but without love, I'm just like a clinging cymbal and it means nothing. So the greatest is love. And I feel like in my job, I get to show people a lot of love. So I love my job.
I would probably have to agree with what Austin was saying. Growing up, I definitely was not someone that wanted to be in front of everybody public speaking at all. Mm-hmm. So with teaching, that's kind of helped me help me out with teaching to the youth students or other stuff in my ministry that I'll be doing. I'll be teaching English to other people. So I think teaching definitely, at the time in college when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I don't think it necessarily clicked that this eventually would be a big portion of my ministry that I'd be doing. But now I can definitely see where God was connecting all the lines before I even realized. So
it's crazy how God lines that up and you had no idea.
Right. I think for me, this hasn't all, again, it was super difficult for me to be able to get to kind of where I am, figuring out what I was going to do. For me, though, I've always felt all the way back into middle school that I was called to be able to do something in youth ministry. I mean, I had a P7 club all through high school. The youth ministry was what I felt like was going to be my main thing that I did in my life. And whatever God kind of takes me after that, he takes me after that. So going into the architectural draftsman field, that has always kind of been something of, this is going to enable me. It's going to be able to take care of my family. It's going to be able to take care of my future. So there I can spend the time I need to here to be able to do what God has fully called me to here. And now if God ever calls me to full-time ministry, that would be so cool and I'd love it. But I grew up as a pastor's kid, and I talked about this before in a previous episode, and my dad pastored for most of my life and was never full-time ministry. So growing up, I never knew what full-time ministry was. It was always you have a church that you work at, and then you have your secular job. I know for a lot of people, God gives the ability to them where they don't have to worry about having a secular job because they're able to go full-time. But that was never something that I ever have seeked in my life. But, you know, whatever God kind of opens up the doors with that, I know that youth ministry right now for me is where I'm really supposed to be putting my attention to.
Right. I mean, I think, you know, your ministry and your job, sometimes they have to like line up, but it could also just be a way to help you with your ministry. Like I knew that when I wanted to teach, like I knew the pay was not good. Okay. I knew that off the bat. I knew the insurance was like, that's probably one of the better jobs, and that's great. And it could help me take care of the family and all that when I have one day. But the main thing was that I would be able to have enough time to do stuff at church.
So say, plus you get summers off.
Yeah, I get summers off.
That's a big bonus.
But like I knew I would get off at a certain time every day, and I would never have to worry about missing a Wednesday night. I would never have to worry about missing a Friday night youth service. But it was mainly for me a schedule thing, because I could do both and still get insurance and a paycheck and the things that you need. So, but I think that sometimes they go hand in hand, but sometimes it's just a way to help you do more and spend more time in your ministry.
Right. Would you guys give any advice to like students who are trying to figure out what in the world they want to do? There's so many options out in the world of like, hey, you're going through high school. Okay, you're in your junior year. You're taking your ACT. You need to figure out what in the world that you're supposed to be doing for the rest of your life. So that way you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to have extra student loans or anything. But it can be such a stressful time to be, again, talking from a person that was like that, to be a person going through my junior year, going through my senior year, not having any idea what in the world I wanted to do. But I knew that I wanted to be in God's will no matter what, because I knew that that was what I was called to do, where he had some kind of calling for me. So what would you guys say to a student who is struggling to be able to figure out what is the right path to take?
I would say to go against the norm, something that I was not told to do. It was so enforced in my house. As soon as you get out of high school, go to college. I would say go against that. And if you don't know, don't waste your money. Like, take the time to be in that waiting season and pray about it. Like, wait on God, like, to tell you something rather than you're wasting all this money and you have no idea what you're going to do, is something that I would say.
I would agree. I would say that college isn't necessarily for everybody. So like some people I think are going to be way more successful at like a trade school or getting certain jobs right after high school. So to go along with what Casey said, I think praying about it is like a big factor to make sure you're getting a job that, one, is in God's will, and two, that you're going to enjoy, because he's not going to put you somewhere that he knows you're going to be miserable. But also, I think I've always heard a saying that if you love your job, you never have to work. So as long as you get a job that like you really love, it doesn't feel like you're necessarily going to work. I know before I graduated with my teaching degree, there were a few jobs that I definitely did not like. So I could tell like, I'm just doing this to make sure I can get a paycheck every week. But since I've started teaching like every single day, like I wake up and I go to work, but it doesn't really feel like I'm going to work because I love my job so much. So I think, like she said, praying about it and then taking your time and figuring out what route you want to go. And then God will help you figure out what is going to be best for you.
Right.
I mean, I'd say kind of to bounce off that, you know, both of y'all just don't rush into it. You don't know, don't waste your time. And that, you know, it is a big decision, but like you're saying, there are certain jobs that you knew that were just a process to get you to where you want to be. And that when you get out of high school, sometimes you might just need to work a job, you know, work a job and just until you figure out what you want to do and pray about it. And you can even like, they have job shadowing. Right. Go watch somebody do, I might be interested in being some sort of engineer. Go watch somebody. If you get there and you're like, wow, this is terrible, that'd be better to figure that out when you're 18 than 22 with a degree and you're like, well, don't know what to do now. Yeah.
Kind of just stuck.
Yeah. So I would say don't rush and take your time and figure out what you want to do, and also just pray about it.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say there is I feel like going into your career is one of the biggest decisions that you can ever make in your life. And it's such a big decision, which you should pray about every decision. But it's so important that you make the decision of where you're going with your career that you have to pray about it. This cannot be a decision that you make on your own. It has to be something that you bring God into it, because there are a lot of doors that can open. And I know Brother Carey said in the last few of our episodes, God can open up doors for you, but so can the devil and so can the world too. Yeah. So it's more about praying of like, okay, I have this opportunity. I have this scholarship to be able to go to college to be able to do this. But God can say, look, that's great, but I actually have you plan on doing this. Or God may say, hey, I know you have this opportunity, but I want you to wait a little bit longer because I'm trying to develop something in you. Or it can say, hey, I want you to go to this, even though you don't see a way to be able to do that. So I feel like you have to pray and bring him into that situation, because if you don't, you could be like kind of what Austin said. You just end up in a situation, you get through college and you're like, okay, I'm not happy with where I've been at. This, right. I don't feel fulfilled by the job I have. I also kind of want to bring up the subject of a lot of times when we're thinking of like, okay, I want to follow God's plan for my life and I want to follow where he's called me to. For some people, that's not necessarily, you're not called to a specific thing into the church. Right, because God talks about the church being a body and there's different members of the body. So not every person is going to be called to being on a platform. Right. Not everybody is going to be called to being a musician or a youth team member or things like that. But instead, they can be called to being a nurse, being a teacher, because there's got to be people on the pews and saints that are willing there to be able to worship and serve in other places beyond just the pulpit ministry.
Yeah, I mean, if we didn't have people, outreaching and all of that, even in their job, then the church wouldn't be growing. If you had 75 and those 75 only stayed and never talked about church outside of these walls, it'd only stay 75. So I think for a church to grow and for the kingdom of God to grow, it's necessary, right? That your ministry follows you outside of these walls into your job, whether that be a secular job or you just go and you go get food Chick-fil-A and you just talk to somebody about God. I think it follows you wherever you go, and you have to, as a Christian, you have to do that.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jesus said, "Go ye all and preach the gospel." That doesn't mean literally everybody's meant to be a preacher. That means someone in a construction job. That means they are the light to Jesus at their job. That doesn't mean that when they go to their job, since they're not actually in a church ministry, that they don't do anything.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, I look at it kind of the same way Casey was saying, but everybody has their own missions field. Mm-hmm. So as a nurse, your missions field is the hospital. As a teacher, our missions field is the students that God gives us every year that we're teaching. Where no matter what your job is, being a secular job that's maybe not full-time ministry, then that's where God's placed you there for a reason, and that's to reach those people that he's put you for. Now, that might change over different seasons in your life, but I look at it as that's your missions field that God's placed you at for that time.
Right.
I feel like it's very important to be also all in and be very confident. If you're the only person at your job that believes in Christ, be confident in that. Because that's something that's very special. I feel like when they're the only one at their job, they can catch themselves being like, oh, I remember when I used to do that. I want to go with them and do that. But when Eutychus was in the window and he was half in, half out, he fell out and he died. So he was brought back to life because God's very merciful, but that's besides the point. And that's the same thing with Lot's wife. She looks back.
Right.
You don't need to look back when you get called.
Right. I think it can be so easy to not realize how much influence that you have as just a person out in the workforce. Things that people that your pastor will never have a chance to be able to talk to, you have a chance to talk to every single day. And it's not always the case of, oh, you need to go talk to every single person in your work and talk to them. Do you want to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? You don't have to go up and talk to people like that. You can if they're interested, but a lot of times if you just go up to a random person and just hey, let's talk about this right now, you're going to kind of scare them off because it's just such a a big conversation to try and force on somebody. But you have so much influence on where God has placed you in the workforce by just being an authentic Christian, by just living it day to day to day.
Yeah.
So kind of what does that look like for you guys in your jobs with just living an authentic life in your career?
I mean, I would say as a teacher, there's a lot of rules, with those sort of topics. And do I necessarily go in every day preaching or anything like that? No, but like I start off the year and I tell them like I have this position at the church, and if they ask questions, then I'm like, absolutely, I'll answer any single question you got. Ask more. But technically, I'm not allowed to like just come out and say, hey, we're gonna bring the church van over here. Everybody, let's go to Turning Point. You know what I mean? But like, it's mainly just being that light in a dark place, because I mean, Chelsea knows this, is that middle schoolers, it's either life is amazing or it's the absolute worst, and there's no in between. So like when they're at those moments of, man, this is the worst, like my life's terrible, you can be there to be like, look, it's a small season, everything's gonna be okay. And you don't have to like bring out a Bible verse. It's just like Casey was saying with being a nurse, showing that love, showing that you care about them, showing them that they're not alone, that they don't walk this life by themselves. Like they have people that support them and care for them and love them. I think that alone, they realize, oh, Mr. Hicks or Miss Burton is different than the other teacher in my school, because they're just like, whatever. And they see something different and they start to say, okay, I want to know what that is.
Right. It's like I've learned I can trust them with the things I've said because they've reacted differently than everybody else. They've actually shown that they've cared.
Yeah.
I feel like with teaching, like when something like that comes up with students, like he said, there's kind of like a line that you can't just go out and start your first period off every day praying, Yeah. So like there's so much you can say and can't say, but once a student begins to open up to you, then that's when you can be like, oh, I'm sorry to hear about that. I'll be praying for you.
Yeah.
And you can say certain stuff like that and just being a listening ear and being the light of Christ and showing his love. I feel like the students, like they pick up on that and they're like, wow, like this teacher actually cares to hear about whatever is going on at home or in my family. So then that kind of creates that trust with you and that student. And then they are able to come up to you and talk or whatever, because like you said, middle school, everything's great or everything's terrible. So just almost like being that listening ear for them, that they're comfortable to come up and talk to you if they need anything or whatever it is. But I think a lot of it is just the light of Christ and showing his love to the students.
And I was going to say, as a girl, I feel like it's a little different, at least at my job, because when people see, like when I first see a guy, you don't know if they're Christian or if they're not Christian. Right. But when people see me at my job, I look a little different. I'm a little more modest in what I wear and how I talk and how I like present myself. Right. So I feel like it's a little different. And sometimes that can be hard because when people like do things, it's automatically like, oh, we don't even have to ask her because she's not going to go. But then again, like you take pride in that because when they need something or need somebody to pray for them, they come to me first.
Yeah, right.
You know? So I would say for a girl, it's a little different as far as like just looking on the outer appearance and knowing who they are.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think again, it's just so important that we realize that we can affect somebody's life from day to day just by being separate. Our influence comes from our separation, from not doing everything that everybody else is doing, from acting different than how other teachers would act. Or if you're in some kind of physical work field, not the way that you talk, the way that you carry yourself, the way that you separate yourself from what the normal for them is, the more influence that you start to have because people start to realize something different. And it's just kind of like how Casey said, they'll start to treat you different if they start to notice that. If they realize that you don't cuss around them, okay, usually if you have a good person that pays attention, they will start to cuss less around you. Or I've ran into situations at my work. My work knows that I'm a youth pastor. I am an intern right now at an architectural firm. They know that I'm a youth pastor. I've had to come to work before after going home for lunch dressed up in a suit because we were going to a youth event right after, and I didn't have time to go home to change. And they know for a fact that I'm in the ministry. So as soon as they found out that I was in the ministry and I shared that to them, they automatically started treating me different. The way that they talked to me was completely different. The way that they carry themselves. I can walk into a room and they're having a completely separate conversation, and then they let a word slip, and then they realize I'm in the room and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that in front of you." Yeah. It's just crazy how different, or how being different actually affects everybody else around you, how well people notice.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old saying, your actions speak louder than words. Because, I mean, if any of us were to go into our job and just carry our Bible and start preaching, like, odds are we're not going to have very many that respond. But if we just, as literally all of us said, showing up, showing that love, that compassion, especially like I'm sure as a nurse that some of the nurses probably do not care. They want their paycheck and they leave. But if you walk in and you show the compassion and love that of Christ, then it's, that's different than my last nurse. That's different. What's special about her? And then that curiosity begins to happen and they start asking questions. But I think it's just like we've said, just being that influence and being separate shows a lot of your values and who you are.
Now I'll ask you guys, have you guys ever ran into trouble? I feel like there can be sometimes trouble with, hey, I'm called to a ministry, so therefore I'm going to serve in this at my church. But also, of course, I have a secular job, so that way I can take care of myself and my family. And sometimes those things can clash, especially whenever it comes to there's only 24 hours in the day. And I have, again, as youth pastor, I have a youth event that I'm having to go to directly after work. But, now my work is wanting me to stay after to finish a project. Okay, what do I need to do here? Because I can't do both, but I know I'm supposed to have more priority to ministry than I am this. So what have you guys ever had a situation where it's just kind of clashed, where you've had to try to navigate and balance having both the secular job and also having a ministry at the church?
I would say absolutely. Before teaching, I worked in like food and a restaurant, and that was always clashing because I was working later nights, Friday nights. Like if you got off a Friday night, like you were good. But I think that was always hard because it was a job, and I needed that job to, pay for things and help pay for school and my books and all that stuff. But once I got to my career, I knew that was something that I had to compromise on. I wasn't going to do it. But with it being a job to get me to where I was trying to be, to set me up for the rest of my life, then okay, like not that I wanted to, but I knew that there were some Friday night events that I probably could not go to if I wanted to keep this job and keep getting a paycheck. But I knew that when I got to my career that I wasn't going to compromise on that. That was something that like I wasn't budging. Like I'm going to be at those Friday nights. I'm not missing a Wednesday. I'm not missing Sundays. But as a job, I feel like as a young person, you have jobs. But once you get to your career, I think that's something that you need to stand firm on, that your values are your values. What you want to go to. Right. But
I feel like something for me, because I feel like I struggled with this at first, but I feel like it's because, I know we talked about this a little bit before, but it's because I only had a made up mind and I never had a true, genuine relationship with God. And I know that you can have that and still have struggles, but when you have that, I feel like your whole perspective changes and you're like, no matter what, I'm going to be there. No matter what, I'm going to make time for this. And I feel like for much is given, like much is required. So if you work 5 days a week, it stinks, but get up a little early, get up a little early before your job and study with your cup of coffee. Listen to a Bible verse, pray before you get up for your day, and 30 minutes earlier for a start. But then there's a Sabbath for a reason. Rest. Take your Sabbath day. Don't feel like you have to get up 2 hours before every single day and do this whole tabernacle prayer every single day. Like, it's not like a job. It starts with a desire to want to, and then it all changes.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, when I was in high school and college, most of the jobs that I would have going into it, now there were a few times on Wednesdays nights, like I would have to leave like the latest that I could to make sure I made it to church. But I feel like for the most part, God blessed me with jobs where my boss, they were okay with me leaving at say 6:30 on a Wednesday night to make sure I got to church by 7. And then especially with my career, there's been a few times with teaching, like during basketball season, where we would have a later practice during the week. And I would just have to tell the coach, like, hey, I have church at 7. As soon as practice ends at 6:30, I got to head out. Now, and I might not be able to help him clean up the gym or put the bleachers back, but they were always very understanding with that. So I feel like most of the time God, he blessed me with jobs where my boss, they were kind of understanding, and I didn't have too many instances that clashed with church or church events. So I didn't have to necessarily go through that as much with the jobs that I had, but there were times, a lot of the times I just had to be like upfront, like, hey, every Sunday I have church, every Wednesday, this would be the latest I could stay. And some Fridays I would just try to let them know like ahead of time. So hopefully they would be understanding and be able to let me off. But definitely letting them know ahead of time helped a lot.
You can't just expect them to know your schedule. Like,
Oh, yeah.
You can't, you gave me my schedule. Well, you should have known I can't work this Friday, but you didn't talk to them about that. You got to, it goes both ways.
Communication was big when it came to trying to let them know, hey, I need this Friday off, or I need to get off at this time if that's okay with you all. So.
And with my job, it's not like I can say, hey, nobody be sick on a Sunday. I'm not going to come to work. Nobody have an accident, nothing. So for my job, I feel like it's different because I do have to miss some Sundays and I do have to miss some Wednesdays. But I have grown to love car rides. I have to drive so long, and I'll most of the time take that time just to be my time, like with God, and pray, listen to my Bible, whatever I feel like I need to do. That's something that's helped me.
Yeah.
I'll say for all of my students that are working fast food, and you're like, well, how can I put that right now? If I go and try to ask off for a youth event, my manager hollers at me and says, no, you're not having this day off. Here's what I'll say. When you go and you get hired for a job, whether it's fast food or whether it's, if you will set the standard of when you're hired of saying, hey, I need to have Sundays off because I have church on Sunday. I can maybe work Sunday nights if I don't have a night service, but I need to have Sunday mornings. I need to have Wednesdays off. And there are a few times that I need to be able to have Fridays off for youth events, but I will let you know ahead of time by 2 weeks because my youth pastor lets me know enough time in 2 weeks, but it's not a request. I have to have those things off because that's something that I've committed my church. But then with them hiring you with that precedent, then you have that set for whenever you go through it. And if you ever do run into any problems where it's like, hey, I'm supposed to be playing piano at this youth service, I need off, I've given you a 2-week notice, and they try to fight you, then at that point you're like, look, you hired me with this point at knowing that this was going to be a thing, so I'm sorry, but this is just the thing that I have to do. I apologize. But last question that we're going to ask for this episode. Do you guys have any like tips or tricks for students who are going into careers or some adults that are going into careers about how they can live authentic and how they can kind of increase their influence as they're going through their job?
I would say always go to work prayed up. Never go to work. I can tell a difference when I walk into the building and I haven't prayed and spent that time with God than when I did walk in. Mm-hmm. When you pray, it changes everything. I would say a big thing when going into with your job and being authentic, you have to kind of know who you are and what your foundations are first. Because especially if it's not a job that's full-time ministry and you're going to the hospital, fast food restaurant, if you're going into a school, there's so many other opinions and views from the world that are constantly just out there, like anywhere. So I think knowing who you are and what you believe and having that firm foundation and knowing that whatever everybody else is doing, like I'm not going to be swayed. Right. So that's going good. Into it, knowing who you are, what you're doing, all of those things, I think that makes a big difference in just being authentic, because then you can be yourself. You don't have to worry about what other people say or how they look at you or how they act or how they talk, because you know who you are, you know what you're doing, you know what your purpose in life is and all those things. So I think that makes a big difference too. Now I've got a Firm Foundation by Maverick City stuck in my head. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's just being authentic. I mean, that's the point of this podcast is explain the authentic conversations that we have with that. You have any tips, Austin, that you can think of?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, not to repeat everything, but something maybe a little different is that for teachers, I would say like we have one place we go to every single day. And like somebody might have an office they go to every single day. I would say like pray over your space. Like obviously pray on the way, have a made up mind, and like know what you believe and have that firm foundation. But like if you have an office, pray over your office that God protects it. As like my brother's a lineman, he doesn't know where he's going to work every single day, but like he can pray over where, like when he gets there, quick prayer to said, hey, God, protect me today, walk with me, be with me. It's just, I think, praying leading up, and then also whenever you're there, knowing that your job and wherever you're at is prayed over and that he's with you. I think that's a big thing too.
To add on to that, to my job, I feel like since I never know what my patients, like what I'm going to do that day, I always like pray over my hands and pray over my feet and pray that the Lord would just like put a watch over the things that I say. But also too, I feel like we do keep saying like pray, which is fantastic. Also, don't just pray about yourself. I was going to say there is safety in the multitude of counsel. If you're struggling, like tell someone. Don't keep it to yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say something that I like to pray for myself, especially going into the work field, is for a spirit of boldness. Because I never want to be put into a situation where I feel like I'm the odd one out because everybody else is doing something and then I'm not. And then I feel like I have to cave to be able to still keep like a healthy work relationship. Learn when you got to step away. If you're having a work party and then somebody brings alcohol to that and you're like, okay, well, I want to still have a good work relationship, so I'm going to stay at this party. No, learn to step away, because if you have your priorities set right to where God comes first, then that shouldn't be an issue. And they're going to only understand that more by taking that step away. But also have that spirit of boldness to where if you see an opportunity up in your work, I know you guys can't too much with being a teacher, but for my job, if somebody comes up and they're like, man, this stuff is just kind of going on, it's like, okay, well, give me the spirit of boldness to be able to pray with that person and not care about if anybody else in my job is going to think that it's weird or that it's not normal. We're not supposed to be normal. Right. We're supposed to be in this world, but not of this world. So for me, it's so important to be able to just pray for that spirit of boldness as I go into my workforce, that I can be different and not feel pressured to be able to change that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've covered pretty much everything between teacher, architect, and then nurse. Like we've got all the different aspects of jobs. So,
right.
I mean, it's stand firm on what you believe and don't sway that. Right.
I will say everybody's relationship with God whenever it comes to your work will always look different.
Right.
So the things that we set may not always work for you, and the things that you set may not always work for somebody else. But it's about having that prayer relationship with God, which each step that you take to be able to enable that relationship with God is made with that prayer in mind. With God saying, okay, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do here. You need to pray here. You need to step back here.
And also don't compare.
Right.
Like, don't look at someone and be like, I wish I could talk in front of people like they do. I can't say nothing without stuttering 5 words. Well, maybe you're not meant to talk in front of everybody, and that's completely okay.
Right.
Like the people behind the scenes don't get enough credit. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see.
Yeah.
Right. Well, with that, we actually want to thank the people that are behind the scenes.
Right.
We could not do this podcast without having the team that we have behind us, with Bo and Jeff sitting behind the soundboard watching us at this point. But so we want to thank Chelsea and Casey also coming out and helping us with this episode today, and also with another episode that we're fixing to record. And we want to thank you guys for coming out and listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube. Every single view that we get helps as we try to share kind of what God has put on our heart and what we feel like God has called us to do. So I would ask you to do this. Share this episode on your Instagram, on your Facebook, like the video on YouTube, go on Spotify, and then share it to people. Anything that we can do to be able to get this out to more people and really kind of share what we've put on our heart is just going to help us tremendously. And thank you guys ahead of time for go ahead and doing that. But we want to go and close it up how we always do. So remember, as a part of Authentic Student Ministries, our purpose is to reach, develop, and engage students into the church that they may become authentic Christians who honor God with their lives. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.